Every once in a while, a case file lands on your desk that just makes you pause. It's not because it's some incredibly complicated crime, but because the mistake at its core is just so simple. Today, we're diving into one of those files, a story that starts with a stolen money order, a mistaken identity, and a huge question about how our justice system can get things so wrong.
And this is the man right at the center of it all, Kenneth Windley. Just listen to that quote. "It cost me 20 years, but they said they corrected it now, so that's all that matters." Wow. That single sentence just sums up the incredible human cost we're about to unpack. We're talking 2 decades of a life, just gone.
So let's get into the facts here. The entire chain of events that would completely derail a man's life, well, it all started with something most of us wouldn't even think twice about: buying a new stove.
Okay, so let's lay out the basic facts, the stuff that nobody, not the prosecution or the defense, disputes. It's 2005, a 70-year-old man gets robbed in Brooklyn. A few weeks go by, and one of the stolen money orders pops up. It's used to buy a stove. And guess what? The police trace that purchase straight back to one guy, Kenneth Windley. I mean, from a prosecutor's point of view, you're thinking, case closed, right? Seems pretty straightforward.
But that paper trail, that wasn't actually the piece of evidence that sealed Kenneth Windley's fate. Nope, it was something far more powerful in a courtroom and, as we're about to see, far more fallible.
And there it is. The victim pointed at Kenneth Windley and said, "That's the guy." You have to understand, in a courtroom, there are very few things as persuasive to a jury as a victim looking at the accused and identifying them. It creates this direct emotional connection between the defendant and the crime itself.
And right there, that is the absolute core question of this entire case. It's something that, as a defense lawyer, you learn to question almost immediately. See, human memory isn't like hitting record on a camera. It's just not. It's messy, it can be changed, and when you put it under the incredible stress of a violent crime, well, it can become dangerously unreliable.
So the jury was basically left with 2 totally different stories to choose from. The prosecution's version: Windley was a violent robber who used what he stole. But the defense had a different take. He was just naive, a guy who bought a money order from some hustlers on the street. He even admitted the deal felt a little shady, but he swore he had no clue it was tied to a robbery.
And to back up his story, Windley told the police something pretty interesting. He said he'd never even used a money order before in his life, that he didn't even really know how to fill one out. Now that might seem like a small detail, but it's crucial, right? It paints a picture of someone who isn't familiar with the very thing he was accused of stealing, not exactly the mark of a seasoned criminal.
But despite his story, the sheer power of that one eyewitness pointing a finger was just too much to overcome, and it led to an absolutely devastating outcome.
So in 2007, the jury comes back with their decision: guilty of second-degree robbery. And here's the kicker: because Windley had some prior felonies, the judge threw the book at him. The sentence? 20 years to life. Can you imagine? Your entire world just vanishes with that one word: guilty.
20 years. I mean, really think about that for a second. It's not just a number. It's everything that number represents. All the birthdays, the holidays, the funerals, the simple feeling of walking outside whenever you want. All of it, just gone. And all of it based on what we now know was a terrible mistake.
But this story, thankfully, doesn't end in that prison cell. Because while he was locked up, Kenneth Windley never, ever stopped fighting. And he started to unravel this single fatal flaw in the entire case against him. Windley's case is, it's a textbook example of a wrongful conviction. And the main culprit? The very thing that seemed so bulletproof at trial: eyewitness misidentification. Study after study shows it's one of the top reasons innocent people end up in prison.
So how did he get out? This is incredible. He basically became his own detective from inside a prison cell. He never stopped fighting. And get this, he's the one who figured out who the real robbers were. And they were already locked up for doing the exact same kind of stuff. Once that came to light, prosecutors had no choice but to take another look. And finally, a judge officially overturned his conviction. He was declared an innocent man.
So Kenneth Windley gets his freedom back, which is amazing. But his story really puts our entire justice system on trial. What can we possibly learn from a life that was so profoundly and wrongly interrupted?
He went to prison at 41 years old. He walked out a free man at 61. Think about that. He got his mean back, but he could never, ever get back those 2 decades. The system that took away his freedom eventually corrected its mistake, but the price
The price had already been paid in full.
So, when you close this case file, what are the big takeaways? First, and this is huge, eyewitness testimony is powerful, no doubt, but man, it can be so flawed. Second, it's a scary reminder of how a jury can get tunnel vision on one single piece of evidence, especially one that pulls at the heartstrings. And it really highlights this massive legal challenge. How do you prove what someone was thinking, their intent? Windley went to prison because a jury believed he knew what he was doing, and that belief was built on a complete misidentification. And maybe the biggest lesson of all, the system makes mistakes, big ones, and the price is paid in lost years.
And all of this leaves us with a really tough question, doesn't it? The thing is, Kenneth Windley's story isn't some one-in-a-million fluke. It's a powerful, sobering reminder of just how fragile justice can be. So if one person's life can be completely derailed by a single, flawed identification, you have to ask yourself, how many more people are out there? How many more stories just like this are still waiting to be told?